All right. Good afternoon. I'll start off with an update on the Central African Republic and just confirming that the Security Council has approved on December 23rd the Secretary General's proposal for the temporary redeployment for a 2-month period of 2 infantry companies and 2 military utility helicopters from the UN mission in South Sudan to assist the UN Peacekeeping Mission in the Central African Republic. This is to reinforce the operational capabilities of the peacekeeping mission in the CAR during these electoral context. And on the security front, the peacekeepers are continuing to actively engage in mitigating and growing threats from armed groups throughout the country. The mission is also continuing to provide support to the preparations of the presidential and legislative elections. Peacekeeping Mission is also reporting that the deployment of sensitive election materials to all prefectures was completed yesterday, while voter card distribution continued all over the country. The mission reported that 85% of voter card distribution centers were open and had high turnout despite the security challenges. And yesterday, the Peacekeeping Mission also contributed $500,000 to the UNDP Managed Fund to further help finance the elections. And also on the Central African Republic, the humanitarian coordinator in the CAR, Denise Brown, today issued a statement expressing her concern for the escalation of violence in several parts of the country ahead of the elections on Sunday. Ms. Brown condemned the acts of violence that have led to increased insecurity and more than 55,000 people leaving their homes. She calls on armed groups to comply with the international humanitarian law and immediately stop all attacks against humanitarian personnel and to protect civilians and civilian infrastructure. And an update also on the humanitarian situation in Ethiopia, where the 2 interagency assessment missions in Tigray province, our humanitarian colleagues tell us that one of the teams is now in Mekele, awaiting to proceed to Adigrat. The other team, however, has not yet, as of yesterday, been able to proceed to Shire as planned due to additional permissions requested by the authorities. The Ministry of Peace, the Ethiopian Ministry of Peace, is expected to facilitate the clearance as soon as possible. Health, nutrition, food, water, sanitation, and hygiene, as well as non-food items, are the priority needs. And turning to Ukraine, where we, along with our humanitarian partners, have now delivered 315 metric tons of humanitarian aid and refrigeration equipment to non-governmental controlled areas in eastern Ukraine. Yesterday, 25 trucks of shelter material, medical supplies, personal protective equipment, water, sanitation, hygiene, and non-food items were delivered for further distribution in Luhansk province. Today, 100 refrigerators from UNICEF required for the storage of medical supplies were transported to Donetsk province for further distribution to healthcare facilities. We, along with our humanitarian partners, have been on the ground in eastern Ukraine since 2014, providing relief and protection assistance worth more than $1.2 billion. Each year, humanitarian organizations have reached more than 1 million people on both sides of the contact line. Turning to Mozambique, the World Food Programme today said they are extremely concerned about the dire humanitarian and food situation in northern Mozambique, brought on by escalating violence and displacement from Cabo Delgado. According to WFP, more than 900,000 people in Cabo Delgado, Nyassa, Nampula are now facing crisis or emergency levels of food insecurity. With limited supplies reaching markets, the cost of food and household items has skyrocketed. Despite significant operational challenges, WFP plans to reach 750,000 people in Cabo Delgado and Nampula and Nyassa provinces. The UN agency says $117 million is required to provide support for the next 12 months in Mozambique. In the absence of enough funding, food supplies will be compromised, leading to a reduction in rations or a potential suspension of food distribution, as we've seen in other countries. And turning to Madagascar, in advance of a tropical depression that is moving towards the country, our humanitarian colleagues tell us that the government is coordinating preparedness activities for possible response. We, along with our partners, are also identifying emergency supplies available in support of the government. OCHA is also identifying an assessment team for potential deployment. They also warn that the depression, which is being called Chalan, could hit the Mozambique coast next week, and that's where Cyclone Idai hit nearly 2 years ago, and this relates obviously to Cabo Delgado, which we've just spoken about. Responsible government agencies are putting preparedness measures in place. This Sunday is the first observance of the International Day of Epidemic Preparedness. In his message for the day, the Secretary General notes that the day falls at the end of the year in which a scenario many had feared came tragically true. The Secretary General points out that COVID-19, having now killed more than 1.7 million people, devastated economies, upended societies, and exposed the world's vulnerabilities in the starkest ways. The value of health emergency preparedness has hit home like never before. The Secretary General stressed that as we strive to control and recover from the current pandemic, we must think about the next. He adds that preparedness is a sound investment costing far less than emergency expenditures, and that science must be our guide. For him, solidarity and coordination are crucial within and among countries. No one is safe unless all of us are safe, he adds. And speaking of COVID, in Thailand, our resident coordinator, Gita Sabarwal, is leading the UN team's work with the government, the private sector, and civil society to address the impacts of the pandemic. WHO is supporting the government to pilot a new healthcare model which will boost access to telemedicine. UNDP is monitoring the impact of Thailand's economic stimulus package on people's livelihoods, and in partnership with the UN Environment Programme and the International Labour Organization, the green aspects of the recovery. Our team in Thailand is also engaging in the private sector for green, climate-friendly investments to recover better. Together with the pandemic, UNIDO, the UN Industrial Development Organization, is providing technical assistance to introduce regenerative furnaces and scrap processing machines to reduce dioxin and CO2 emissions in steel and aluminum factories. And for their part, UNICEF, UNESCO, and the International Telecommunications Union are working with authorities to identify schools and communities lacking internet access and to support e-learning. WMO, the World Meteorological Organization, said today the past decade, that's 2011 to 2020, was the warmest on record, and this year remains on track to be one of the 3 warmest on records. The exceptional heat of 2020 is despite the cooling of La Nina, which is now impacting weather patterns in many parts of the world. According to WMO, 2020 will most likely end up being the 2nd warmest year to date, behind 2016 and ahead of 2019. A reminder that we will not brief tomorrow, obviously, and we will not brief next week, though we will be putting highlights on the web at about noon. So I want to take this occasion to wish you all a Merry Christmas if you celebrate Christmas. If you don't, go get some Chinese food and enjoy the day off, as we do in New York. And just thank you for all your cooperation, and a big shout out to all our technicians who have helped us put this briefing together each and every day. So on that note, I will take a question. Yes, please.
Hey, Stéphane, I have a question about the Sustainable Development Goals. We know that even last year, before the pandemic, people here at the UN were lamenting the fact that interest rates were too low to move the goals forward. Can you tell us a little bit about where do we stand right now with regard to those goals at the end of this pandemic year?
I think what we have, let me start with the good news. I think on the good news is that I think we've seen the needle move in the right direction on climate change. And with pledges by so many countries to be carbon neutral or carbon zero by 2050, by 2030. We've seen different dates. So it's very positive movement. We hope that these pledges will turn into real commitments ahead of the next COP in Glasgow. And obviously, climate impacts the SDGs across the board. On the bad news, I think we have seen the pandemic hit all of the SDGs in a negative way, whether it's on issues of women, on gender, on education and health. And I think this next year and the years following will need to see a redouble of effort, a redouble of investment, so we can get the SDGs back on the correct track. Yes, Ray.
Thank you, Stéphane. The leader of the Libyan National Army, Khalifa Haftar, just declared minutes ago that there will be a war against Turkey and its mercenaries. And he said also that there is no choice for Turkey. They have either to leave peacefully Libya or in other way. And also 2 days ago, as I mentioned, the Turkish parliament renewed the mission of their troops for another 18 months in Libya. Just we need to know any comment or statement on that. Thank you.
Sure. I mean, what I can, I haven't seen the statements made by Marshal Haftar, General Haftar. What is clear to us is that it is important that all the parties in Libya redouble their efforts and participate actively in the different dialogue tracks that have been that they are working on, supported by the UN mission. I think as this year comes to a close, it is important that the people of Libya can see tangible signs of hope, with leaders pledging peace instead of war, and that all those countries that have influence over the parties in Libya exercise that influence in a positive way. The last thing that the Libyan people need now are more weapons, more soldiers. What they need is peace, a chance to strengthen and rebuild their political infrastructure, their political institutions, and to restart their development and peace, and to deal as well as dealing with the pandemic.
Do you see that the Turkish military presence in Libya is just an influence, or is it an occupation, or?
Look, there are.
There
I
are
think
troops.
if you look at the various reports published by the UN experts, there are a number of countries that have military presence, either directly or indirectly, in Libya. As I said, it is important that Libya be left to the Libyan people in a way they can freely choose through democratic means their leadership. Okay, Ibtisam, apparently you've been waiting to ask a question.
Thank you. Happy holidays. My question is on the fact that the U.S. President recently pardoned 4 security guards from the private military firm Blackwater who were convicted of killing 14 Iraqis. Do you have any comments on that?
I would first refer you to the statements made by the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. And I think on the broader issue of paid mercenaries, paid military contractors, the Secretary General, I think, has spoken out very forcefully on the negative influence that they have. It is also very important that accountability be registered, that civilians, when civilians are killed, that people are held accountable. Joe Klein.
I have a follow-up.
Yes, please.
I have a follow-up.
Yeah, please go ahead.
I'm aware of the comment. Yeah, I'm aware of the comments of the Commissioner for Human Rights. But my question is whether the Secretary General, or how do you think that this could influence also future tries to bring people to justice, people who committed war crimes? And if you could just say something specifically on this case or in Iraq, the crimes that were committed there.
Look,
Thank you.
We support what the High Commissioner for Human Rights said. This development is not a positive one for accountability of crimes against civilians, and I think that's clear. Who I was calling? Oh, Joe Klein. Joe.
Yes, thank you, and happy holiday. 2 questions. The first, in light of the far more contagious strain of the coronavirus that's broken out in the UK, What is the current status of the Secretary General's plans that were previously announced to go to the UK, I believe, in early January? Where is he now, and when would he plan to come back to the United States? That's my first one.
He is on leave, seeing his family in Portugal. I expect him to be back in New York on the 4th of January, and he'll be working for the residents, during the time that he is required to be in isolation as per the health regulations of our host city. I have no official travel plans to announce for next year as of now.
So the UK trip may still be on?
As I said, I have no official plans to announce as of now.
Okay, my other question relates to, it's really an end of the year question, as to how the Secretary General, what he regards as his most serious shortcoming in terms of what he wanted to achieve in 2020 at the UN, and what he's most proud of in terms of his accomplishments in that regard.
Look, he's not one to toot his own horn, but I guess that's my job. I think one of the things he is most that I think he would deserve to be most proud of is being able to seeing that needle move on climate, right? This is an issue he has spoken about to audiences in China, in Japan, in India, with a strong message, and we have seen the needle move. I think you saw during the Climate Ambition Summit, which I think we all agreed was not enough, but very important member states made pledges towards carbon neutrality, lowering emissions, and I think that's a reflection of the intense work he has put in on this issue over the past year. In terms of regret, I think simply the lack of real international cooperation we have seen on dealing with the pandemic and all the offshoots of this pandemic, that we would have liked to have seen much stronger coordination, cooperation from the first days that the pandemic hit. Toby.
Hi, thanks very much, Steph. I have a couple of questions today, two short ones and then a more substantive one. The first short one is concerning reports today, of many civilians killed in Ethiopia. Is the UN aware of these reports? And is there any independent mechanism of the UN to be able to verify these reports of many civilians dead?
No, the short answer is that we don't have a presence in the area to confirm it. And I think this is one of the things that Michelle Bachelet was lamenting yesterday in her statement, is that we've seen all these reports of human rights violations, of death, but we have no access, we have no way to implement that. Obviously, we're very concerned. We're saddened over the reports of these reported killings of at least 100 people in Metekel zone of Ethiopia's Benishangul Gumuz region. I think it is very important that the perpetrators of these crimes be brought to justice.
Thank you. Second question has to do with today is the day of epidemic preparedness. You said this was the first day that we've observed this. So was this day, was it put into place? I'm not exactly sure how these days come to be, but was it put into place as a result of COVID-19, or this is
the first time we're marking this day. These days, as you know, for the vast majority, and I think maybe all of them, are the result of resolution passed by the General Assembly. This resolution was passed earlier this year. The significance of the date is that it is the birth date of Louis Pasteur, the renowned French scientist. Gloria, and then we'll go to James Reinl. Okay, James? And Evelyn, are you waving for a question? Okay, so we'll go James Reinl, and I see Mr. Sato as well. James?
Hi there, yeah. On the SG's travel to Portugal, flights between the US and Portugal, it's only permitted for essential travel. Was the SG able to get around these travel restrictions because it's got such great connections?
No, Secretary General, as you know, flies commercial. He flew commercial from Berlin to Portugal, and he will fly commercial back, and he is following all of the requirements and regulations. Evelyn, and then we'll go to Mr. Sato. And I see Santa's helper there with a hat.
Sorry.
But that...
Sorry, Stéphane. The flight, so because he flew internally within Europe from Berlin to Portugal, that means that the flight that he took from New York to Berlin beforehand isn't counting him as a passenger who's traveled from the US, because that would be in breach of the travel restrictions.
Listen, you probably know more about the travel restrictions between New York and Portugal, as it seems you've done some research. I can tell you that he's also following the required guidelines of what is requested of people coming in to Portugal. So I know he was tested on arrival as well.
Okay, thank you.
Evelyn, and then Mr. Sato.
And happy holiday to you, Stéphane, well. And thank you for all your work this year, which wasn't easy. I had a technical problem when Ibtisan was speaking. Did she ask about the President Trump's pardon of the killer in Iraq and the reaction to it? If so, then don't respond to it. But if that wasn't the question,
no, that was addressed, and it was addressed in the statement from the High Commissioner for Human Rights, and I answered that question already.
All right. I have another question on the CAR. There's violence there that everyone reports. You have Russia, Rwanda, and now the French sending planes overhead, and the UN reporting on the misery and chaos there. Why must the elections go ahead? It doesn't sound like they're going to add to the peaceful nature of the country.
Well, I think as you saw from what we're saying, what we've been reporting, that there's an intense yearning from the people of the Central African Republic to be able to participate in these elections. It is our aim in support and working with the government to ensure that there is security for people to express themselves through the ballot box peacefully. And I think it is the responsibility of the international community to do whatever it can so the people of the Central African Republic can express their right to vote and exercise their right to vote.
Thank you.
Mr. Sato.
Thank you, Stéphane. Thank you for your tireless work this year. And my question is about the SDGs. You raised both good news and bad news about SDGs development. So does Secretary General think the need to adjust or enhance the decade of action for SDGs?
Well, I think what the decade of action of the SDGs needs to show is increased action. It's not about adjusting the decade, but is to ensure that as member states put forward recovery packages from the pandemic, that these recovery packages enhance the SDGs and enhance our goal of reaching them instead of setting them back. All right. Gloria, did you have a question? All right. Sorry, Ray, go ahead.
Thank you again, Stéphane. There is an Algerian journalist. His name is.
I'm sorry. Gloria, your connection is very bad. I cannot hear you. Your screen is somewhat frozen. Go ahead, Ray.
Yes, there is a.
I cannot hear you. Screen is somewhat frozen. Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead, Ray.
Okay. There is an Algerian journalist. His name is Khaled Drani. Soon, in January 9th, he will be in January 9th, he will be in jail for like first year. He's going to be in jail. He's accused of endangering the integrity of national territory through social media posts. And he's sentenced for 2 years for this accusation. Any comment on statement on that?
I'm not aware of the details of this case, but what I can tell you is that we have very often expressed our concern about the state of journalism throughout the world and the need for journalists to be able to do their work free of harassment, which obviously includes incarceration, and that really no one should be in jail for expressing an opinion. Okay, on that note, I wish you all a wonderful holiday. Yeah, we need it. So turn off your computers, throw your phones away for a day or 2 or 3, and we will see you on the other side on January 4th. You too. Join